My husband sold my $2 million ranch to my stepsister for $5. He thought I'd cry and walk away quietly. Instead, I smiled. He had no idea what I'd already done long before he made his move. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's the sound of a woman who's already won. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. My name is Beverly. Some of you might know me from around town, always in my dusty truck, smelling faintly of hay and horses. For 25 years, that's been my life. My sanctuary. My legacy. I built a $2 million ranch from nothing but my father's life insurance and a whole lot of grit. And my husband of 18 years sold it to my stepsister for $5. He thought I'd break. He thought I'd cry and just walk away. Instead, I smiled. He had no idea what I'd already done, long before he ever made his move. Sometimes, silence isn't weakness. It's the sound of a woman who's already won. It all started on a Tuesday, a day so ordinary it hurt to look back on. The air in the feed store parking lot was thick with the sweet, earthy smell of grain and the heat shimmering off the asphalt. I was loading the last of my 50-pound bags of feed into the bed of my Ford F-150, the muscles in my back and arms moving with a familiar rhythm. It was a rhythm I'd perfected over 2 decades of this life. Steady. Controlled. Dependable. That's when her car pulled in. A pearl-white Mercedes that looked as out of place here as a diamond tiara on a hog. It purred where my truck rumbled. My stepsister, Mavis, unfolded herself from the passenger seat. She was 10 years younger than me, all sharp angles and store-bought glamour, wearing white linen pants that wouldn't last 10 seconds in a real barn. She was holding a sheaf of papers, waving them like a victory flag in a war I didn't even know I was fighting. Beverly! Just the woman I was looking for, she called out, her voice pitched loud enough for old Tom Murphy, the store owner, and a few other customers to hear. I didn't stop my work. I hefted another bag, the rough burlap a comforting weight in my gloved hands, and swung it into the truck bed. Mavis. What do you want? She sauntered over, her heels sinking slightly into the gravel with each step. Just wanted to thank you for the ranch, she said, a sickly sweet smile plastered on her face. $5 was more than generous. She thrust the papers toward me. It was a deed transfer. And there, at the bottom, was a clumsy, bloated forgery of my signature. It looked like someone had tried to trace my name with their non-dominant hand during an earthquake. Through the tinted glass of the Mercedes, I could see my husband, Sterling, in the driver's seat. He stared straight ahead, his jaw tight, refusing to even look at me. 18 years of marriage, and he couldn't face me while he stole everything I had ever built. In that moment, the cowardice, somehow, hurt more than the betrayal itself. We're thinking of converting those old stables into a hot yoga studio, Mavis continued, her voice dripping with condescension. And maybe a juice bar. Sterling says you won't mind clearing out your personal things by Monday. We need to start renovations right away. Monday. She was giving me 3 days to abandon my life's work. 3 days to walk away from the 2,300 acres I'd bought with the money from my father's funeral, land everyone said was worthless scrub until I poured my blood and sweat into it. Tom Murphy shuffled out from his doorway, his weathered face etched with confusion. He'd sold me my very first bag of feed when I was 25, a grieving daughter determined to build something that would last. Everything all right here, Beverly? He asked, his eyes darting between my calm expression and Mavis's triumphant sneer. Just fine, Tom, I said, my voice even. I slammed the tailgate of my truck shut. Mavis here was just explaining how she thinks she bought my ranch. Thinks? Mavis scoffed, shoving the papers toward Tom. It's all legal and binding. Sterling handled all the paperwork. He's very thorough. Thorough wasn't the word I would have used. After 20 years of signing breeding certificates, veterinary forms, and supply orders, you'd think he'd at least remember what my actual signature looked like. I looked past her, directly at the Mercedes. At the man I had shared a bed with the night before, who had kissed me goodbye that morning as if nothing was wrong. I saw his hand twitch on the door handle, as if he might get out, then think better of it. He was a ghost in his own life, a puppet, and Mavis was holding the strings. I finally turned my full attention to her. I let the silence hang in the air for a long moment, watching the smugness on her face curdle into uncertainty. Then, I gave her a small, tight smile. "You enjoy your $5 fantasy, Mavis. You tell Sterling he knows where to find me if he ever grows a spine." Without another word, I climbed into my truck, turned the key, and pulled out of the parking lot, leaving her standing there in a cloud of dust and confusion. In my rearview mirror, I saw Tom Murphy looking at the forged papers, his expression shifting from confusion to pure disgust. He'd been in business long enough to recognize garbage when he saw it. The 12-minute drive back to the ranch was automatic. My hands knew every curve in the road, my eyes knew every landmark, the Henderson place where their new foal was testing its legs, the big oak that had been split by lightning 5 summers ago, the final rise that overlooked the valley I had transformed. My valley. But today, the familiar scenery felt different. It was like looking at a photograph of a life that was no longer mine. Each fence post I'd mended, each pasture I'd seeded, now felt tainted by their treachery. When I pulled up, Ramona's truck was already parked by the barn. My ranch manager for 12 years. She was more than an employee, she was my right hand, a woman with instincts sharper than a hawk's. She came out of the barn holding a clipboard, but her eyes weren't on her notes. They were on my face. "Beverly," she said, and the single word was filled with a dozen questions. Mavis showed up at the feed store. She claimed she and Sterling bought the ranch for $5. Ramona's expression didn't flicker, but I saw her knuckles turn white where she gripped the clipboard. "That explains it," she said, her voice grim. "I saw Sterling loading boxes into a rental truck this morning while you were with the yearlings. I thought you knew." He had been packing his escape while I was working, dismantling our life together, box by box, while I was blissfully unaware. The thought sent a cold, sharp pang through my chest, but I pushed it down. This wasn't the time for grief. This was the time for war. "Show me," I said. We walked to the house, my house. The one I'd built with my own 2 hands and the last gift my father had left me. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the silence was heavy, wrong. The office door stood open. His desk drawers were pulled out, empty. The filing cabinet had been ransacked. He'd taken anything he thought was important. But Sterling, for all his scheming, was an idiot. He was an idiot if he thought the truly important papers were kept in such obvious places. Ramona followed me to the kitchen. The morning's coffee pot was still on the warmer. The air smelled of bacon from the breakfast I'd made for a man who was planning my ruin. I didn't pause. I reached behind the heavy refrigerator, my fingers finding the familiar cool plastic wrapping of an old coffee tin. I placed it on the kitchen table. Inside, nestled in protective plastic, were the real documents. The original deed, in my name and my name alone, purchased a full year before I even met Sterling. The receipts for every single improvement, from the new barn roof to the irrigation system. The meticulously kept breeding records that proved the value of the bloodlines I had developed. And something else. Tucked at the bottom was a folded hotel receipt from 3 weeks ago. The Riverside Hotel. Champagne, room service for 2. And a handwritten note on the back, "Can't wait for our new beginning. Love, M." I'd found it in his jacket pocket after he claimed he was at a cattle auction in Dallas. "You knew?" Ramona asked softly, her eyes on the receipt. "I suspected," I admitted, my voice tight. I'd seen signs. Late nights he couldn't explain, a new scent on his shirts. Mavis getting a little too familiar. But suspicion and proof are 2 different things. My mind raced back. Mavis had come to live with us 7 years ago. Her mother, my father's second wife, had passed away, leaving her with nothing. I took her in. She was my stepsister, but I treated her like blood. I gave her a home, a job on the ranch when she couldn't hold one anywhere else. I thought I was giving her a fresh start. Instead, I had invited a viper into my home. She had been studying my life, not to learn from it, but to steal it. My phone buzzed, startling me. It was Sterling's sister, Margaret. I'd been ignoring her calls, but now, I answered. "Beverly, thank God," she sounded frantic. "I've been trying to warn you. Sterling's been asking me all sorts of questions about property law, about how to transfer deeds. He thinks because you let him handle the taxes, he has some kind of claim. I told him that's not how an inheritance works, that's not how anything works, but he wouldn't listen. He filed something at the courthouse, Beverly. You need a lawyer. Now. He already tried, Margaret. And I have one." I hung up and looked at Ramona. "Get me Garrett Vance on the phone. His number is in that tin, too." While Ramona made the call, I walked through my silent house. I looked at the walls I'd painted, the floors I'd refinished, the wedding photo on the mantelpiece. Us, young and hopeful. Sterling's smile looked so genuine back then. When had it become a performance? When had love curdled into this greedy, hollow thing? Ramona came back into the living room. "Garrett can see you tomorrow afternoon." "Good." I nodded, my focus sharpening. "Until then, nothing changes. We have horses to feed, stalls to clean, and a ranch to run. Whatever they think they've accomplished with their $5 fiction, the real work doesn't stop. It never had. Not through drought or flood or market crashes. And it sure as hell wouldn't stop now." The next morning, Sterling and Mavis arrived as if they were royalty taking possession of a new castle. He was wearing a suit I'd only seen him wear to funerals and bank meetings. She was dressed in a gaudy sundress, her face glowing with a malicious kind of triumph. "You should start packing, Beverly," Sterling said, not a trace of remorse in his voice. "Mavis wants to get the decorators in here by the end of the week." I just kept slicing tomatoes for my lunch, the knife moving with steady, practiced precision. "This is my house, Sterling." "Not anymore," Mavis chirped, walking past me and running a finger along my butcher block countertop, a look of disdain on her face. "This whole kitchen is so dated. We're going to tear it all out. Open concept. Marble countertops." She then proceeded to walk through my home, my sanctuary, pointing out every flaw, every memory she planned to erase. The third stair that always creaked. The wallpaper in the guest room I had hung myself. Our bedroom. Our closet. He followed her around like a lovesick puppy, nodding at her every whim. But the real assault, the one designed to break me, was yet to come. After they left in her ridiculous white car, leaving a cloud of dust on my clean porch, the phone started ringing. It was a calculated attack, a campaign to destroy my reputation and isolate me. First, Martha Henderson from the neighboring ranch. Then, Ben from the bank, asking about a property transfer confusion. Then Doc Hendricks, our old veterinarian. They were telling everyone that I was having a breakdown. That I was delusional, unstable, making up wild accusations because I couldn't handle the divorce. Each call was a small, public humiliation. But the worst call, the one that almost shattered my composure, came from my daughter. My Jolene. She was away at college, the one pure and perfect thing Sterling and I had ever created together. Her face popped up on my screen, and I answered, my heart seizing in my chest. "Mom? What are you doing?" she asked. "No hello, just accusation." Her voice was thick with tears. "Jolene, honey, what's wrong?" "Dad called me," she sobbed. "He said you're trying to destroy his happiness with Aunt Mavis." that you won't accept the divorce, that you're making up lies about the ranch to hurt them. Each word was a separate wound. He had gotten to her first. He had painted his poisonous picture on her blank canvas. He says you're having some kind of breakdown, Mom. That he's worried about you, but you won't get help. Is it true? I felt the floor drop out from under me. To hear that fear, that doubt, in my own daughter's voice, it was a cruelty I hadn't anticipated. Jolene, none of that is true. Please, just come home this weekend. Let me show you everything. I have a study group, she said, her voice distant. Mom, if you're really having problems, you need to admit it. You need to get help. She hung up. I sat there at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped her with homework and celebrated her birthdays, and for the first time, I felt the icy grip of true despair. He wasn't just trying to steal my ranch. He was trying to steal my daughter. He was trying to erase me completely. Ramona placed a fresh cup of coffee in front of me, her presence a silent, steady anchor. She'll understand when she sees the truth, Ramona said quietly. Will she? I whispered, staring out at the horses in the pasture. His version is simpler. Mother gone crazy is a lot easier for a kid to believe than father committed fraud with her aunt. I looked at the cold, congealed bacon on the plate I'd made for him just yesterday. The rage I had been carefully suppressing began to burn. It was a cold, clean fire. He wanted a war? He was about to get one he could never have imagined. The credit card statement arrived on Thursday, buried between feed store flyers. Sterling usually handled our personal finances, a chore I was happy to delegate while I managed the massive accounts of the ranch. But his name, next to a monthly charge for a secure space storage unit, stopped me cold. We didn't have a storage unit. I drove there that afternoon, telling Ramona I was heading into town for supplies. The facility was on the outskirts of town, a desolate place with rows of identical, sun-bleached orange doors. The manager was a kid, barely out of high school, who recognized me from the community writing programs the ranch sponsored. Mrs. Brennan, he said, smiling. Here to check on your husband's unit? I am, I said, producing my most charming, slightly flustered smile. But you know Sterling, he's lost the key again. Could you possibly help me out? I just need to grab some old tax files. It was a smooth lie, and he bought it completely. He cut the lock without a second thought, probably violating a dozen company policies. The heavy door rolled up with a loud groan, revealing Sterling's secret world. It was an archive of his deceit. Bankers' boxes were stacked neatly, labeled in his blocky handwriting. I pulled one down. Inside were our breeding records, but the sales figures were all wrong. A colt that sold for $50,000 was listed as $15,000. A second set of books for the ranch, meticulously falsified to show massive losses where I knew we'd made a profit. He'd been siphoning money for years. Then I found the letters. Mavis's handwriting was loopy and juvenile, full of hearts dotting the I's. 2 years of them. 2 years of secret meetings, of whispered plans. I read them standing there in the stuffy, hot unit, the air thick with the smell of dust and betrayal. Can't wait until we can stop pretending, one read. That derby party plan is perfect. Get her drunk. Get her signature. Then we're free. The derby party. 2 years ago. Sterling had been so attentive that night, constantly refilling my wine glass, insisting I relax for once. I'd woken up with the worst hangover of my life and a hazy memory of him guiding my hand to sign something. He'd told me it was a routine insurance update. Now I knew. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. I photographed everything. Every falsified record, every love letter, every doctored bank statement. My phone's memory filled as the evidence mounted, a mountain of deception documented in their own words. The last box held receipts for jewelry I'd never seen, resort bills from trips he'd supposedly taken for business, expensive dinners for two while I was home working late. When I got back to the ranch, I found Ramona in the barn office. She had a grim look on her face and a folder in her hand. "I should have told you sooner," she said, closing the door. I kept hoping I was wrong. She spread her own collection of evidence on the desk. Emails she'd intercepted. Copies of documents she'd made before Sterling could destroy them. 3 months ago, he tried to sell Thunder's Pride, our foundation stallion, claiming I was too emotional to handle the negotiations. He'd been creating fake death certificates for horses to sell them off-book. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice hollow. "Because you seemed happy," she said, her own voice cracking. "I didn't want to be the one to." "You protected the ranch," I cut her off, my voice firm. "That's what matters." Together, we traced the money trail. Phantom veterinary bills for procedures never performed, medications never purchased. Dr. Hendrix's signature forged dozens of times. The total was staggering, approaching $400,000 over 3 years. But the final, most violating discovery came late that night. I remembered an old cloud storage account I'd set up for the ranch years ago, one Sterling had forgotten I had administrator access to. At 2 a.m., I logged in. His phone had been automatically syncing to it for years. 2 years of their text messages sprawled before me. "Sterling, she's mucking out stalls again. The stupid cow probably doesn't even know what this ranch is really worth. Mavis, let her play in the dirt. We'll be sipping champagne soon." They mocked my routines, my dedication, my trust. And then I saw the photos. Photos of them on a beach in Cabo during what he'd called a business conference. Photos of them in restaurants I thought he'd gone to with clients. And then, the one that made me run to the bathroom and throw up. A photo of them together, in my bed, tangled in my grandmother's quilt. It was taken last spring, while I was at the Kentucky Horse Show. Mavis's caption read, "Her bed is more comfortable than mine." #upgrade. It wasn't just betrayal. It was desecration. They had defiled every sacred space in my life. The rage that had been simmering inside me finally boiled over. It was no longer just about getting my ranch back. It was about making them pay for every lie, every theft, every moment of humiliation. They hadn't just poked a sleeping bear. They had set her den on fire. The next morning, I was in lawyer Garrett Vance's office at 6 a.m. His eyes were sharp, alert, and he already had a stack of documents waiting for me. He'd been reviewing the evidence Ramona and I had sent over during the night. "Beverly," he said, getting straight to the point, "this is bad. But it's worse for them than it is for you." He laid out the county records. "First, the deed is entirely in your name. It was purchased with inheritance money from your father's estate before you and Sterling were married. His name is on the tax documents for convenience only. Legally, he has zero claim to the property itself. The $5 sale is fraudulent on its face and will be easy to overturn." I felt a sliver of relief, but the knot in my stomach remained. "What about the Derby party? What did I sign?" Garrett leaned back in his leather chair, and for the first time, a grim smile touched his lips. "Ah, yes. The Derby party. Sterling mentioned to me a few months before that he wanted you to sign a power of attorney agreement, giving him more control over the ranch's assets. I advised against it, strongly." "So what did he have me sign?" I pressed, my heart pounding. "He probably thought it was a power of attorney, or a property transfer document he'd downloaded from the internet," Garrett said, pulling out a folder. "But a few weeks before that party, you and I had a meeting. You were worried about protecting the ranch for Jolene's future, in case anything ever happened. At my recommendation, I drew up a post-nuptial agreement. It explicitly states that in the event of a divorce, the ranch and all assets derived from it remain your sole and separate property." He slid the document across the desk. I left a copy in your desk drawer. It seems that on the night of the party, in his drunken haste to deceive you, he grabbed the wrong papers. I stared at the document. There they were. My signature, a little shaky from the wine. And right below it, Sterling's own confident scrawl. He had been so focused on getting me drunk enough to sign, he hadn't bothered to read what he was signing himself after his own celebratory drinks. He accidentally protected you from himself, Garrett stated, the irony thick in his voice. This document is ironclad. Filed, sealed, and legally binding. He played himself. I started to laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. It was a wild, unhinged sound of pure, incredulous relief. The sheer, idiotic arrogance of it all. He had built his own cage and handed me the key. What about the money he stole? I asked, my voice sobering. That's where we hit him back, Garrett said, his expression turning to steel. We'll file criminal charges for embezzlement. We'll also file liens against him personally for 20 years of unpaid labor, your labor, in developing this ranch, calculated at market rates. Between the fraud and the back pay, we're looking at claims of over $1.8 million. Even if his fake sale was legal, which it isn't, these liens would prevent any transfer of assets. We will drain him of everything he has. I sat there, surrounded by the evidence of a betrayal so complete it should have destroyed me. Instead, I felt a strange sense of clarity. Every gut feeling I'd suppressed, every red flag I'd ignored, it was all real. I wasn't crazy. I was right. File it all, I told Garrett, my voice cold and steady. Every lien, every charge. Don't hold back. This is going to get ugly. It's already ugly, Beverly, he replied. Now, we make it legal. Returning to the ranch, I felt a shift inside me. The fear was gone, replaced by a chilling sense of purpose. If they wanted me to be the crazy, broken woman, then that's exactly what I would become. It was time for the performance of a lifetime. The next day, a quiet man named David Park, an investigator recommended by Garrett, arrived at the ranch disguised as a potential buyer for a yearling. While I walked him around the arena, discussing bloodlines and temperament, he was expertly planting listening devices, tiny buttons smaller than a dime, in the kitchen, the living room, and the office. Legal in this state for a property owner protecting against fraud, he'd said. Just act completely normal. Let them hang themselves with their own words. And so, I did. I leaned into the role of the defeated wife. When Sterling came by to grab more of his things, I didn't argue. I just watched him with sad, empty eyes. I packed him a lunch for the road, turkey on wheat, crusts cut off, just how he liked it. I even asked if he needed any of his shirts ironed. The act was so convincing it unnerved him. He expected fights, tears, screaming matches. He got quiet compliance. It made him and Mavis careless. The pinnacle of my performance came that Thursday. Sterling brought Mavis over for dinner. In my house. At my table. Hope you don't mind, he said, not even looking at me. Mavis wanted to see the kitchen in the evening light to plan the demolition. Of course not, I said with a weak, watery smile. Whatever makes you happy, Sterling. I served them pot roast, his mother's recipe. I set the table with our everyday plates, not the good china, that would seem too bitter. I moved around the kitchen with a slow, listless energy, my shoulders slumped. They sat at my table, the table where my daughter had done her homework for 12 years, and they talked about my home as if I wasn't even there. We're thinking marble countertops, Mavis announced, gesturing with her fork at my worn butcher block. And we'll definitely knock out that wall. It needs to feel more open, more modern. Interesting choice, I mumbled, passing the potatoes. Sterling, emboldened by my apparent submission, grew arrogant. He reached across the table and took Mavis's hand. You should be grateful Beverly isn't fighting this, he said to Mavis, but his words were for me. She knows she couldn't have managed this place alone anyway. It was always too much for her. Every word, every smug admission of their scheme was being captured by David's devices. They were happily confessing to conspiracy over a meal I had cooked for them. Later that evening, after they had left, I sat in the dark kitchen, the silence buzzing with the ghosts of their voices. Playing the victim was the most exhausting thing I had ever done. It scraped against every fiber of my being. But I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that every faint tear and every trembling lip was another nail in their coffin. A few days into my performance, I could see Mavis was growing impatient. She had the deed, she had the man, but she didn't have the money. Sterling's personal accounts were modest, the real wealth was tied up in the ranch's operating accounts, which, to his immense frustration, he discovered he could no longer access. My name, and my name alone, was on them. This led to the moment that gave me my first taste of sweet, satisfying revenge. On Saturday, Ramona called me from town. "Beverly, you're not going to believe this. Mavis is at Saddles and Silks, the new high-end equestrian boutique. She's got a pile of stuff at the counter. Looks like she's trying to outfit a whole new life." A wicked idea sparked in my mind. I still had the banking app on my phone, and full control over the joint credit card they thought was their ticket to luxury. "Keep me on the line, Ramona. Just act like you're shopping," I said, my heart starting to beat a little faster. Through the phone, I could hear Mavis's loud, grating voice. "I'll take the Italian leather saddle, the one with the crystal inlays. And those custom boots. Oh, and 4 of those silk show blankets." She was putting on a show for the wealthy horse-set wives in the store, announcing her arrival as the new queen of the county. The total came to just over $9,000. "Just put it on this," I heard her say, her voice dripping with entitlement. I waited. I pictured the scene. The sales clerk running the card. And on my end, I opened the app. I saw the charge attempt to go through. Just as it was processing, with a tap of my finger, I reported the card as stolen and froze the account. There was a pause. "Ma'am," the clerk said, her voice audible through Ramona's phone. "It's been declined." "What?" Mavis squawked. "That's impossible. Run it again. The name is Sterling Brennan." "I did, ma'am." "Declined. Do you have another form of payment?" I could hear the murmurs from the other customers. I could picture Mavis's face, that smug mask of superiority cracking, her cheeks flushing a blotchy, furious red. "This is ridiculous," she hissed, her voice low and venomous now. "My fiancé owns the Brennan Ranch. There's millions in that account." The store owner, a woman I'd known for years, stepped forward. "Well, the Brennan Ranch business account is with Lily," she said, her voice cool and clear. "Always has been. I'm not sure what card you're trying to use, but it's not working here." Ramona had to stifle a laugh. She told me later that Mavis, utterly humiliated, threw the items down on the counter and stormed out of the store, her face a thundercloud. She had tried to buy a lifestyle she hadn't earned, and in front of the very people she was trying to impress, she was exposed as having nothing. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. It was a small victory, a petty one, perhaps. But it was mine. And it was just the beginning. The public humiliation at the boutique created the first real fracture in Mavis and Sterling's united front. Their arguments, all faithfully captured by my hidden microphones, became more frequent and more vicious. "What do you mean, the card is declined?" Mavis shrieked one evening. "You told me we had access to everything." "I thought we did." Sterling's voice was laced with panicked frustration. "She must have locked me out. That witch is up to something." "Up to something? Or maybe you're just not as smart as you think you are. You promised me a certain lifestyle, Sterling. A yoga studio and European horses, not being embarrassed in front of the whole town. Listening to the recordings each night with Ramona became a dark ritual. We'd sit in the barn office, the comforting scent of hay around us, and listen as their perfect fantasy unraveled into a greedy, blame-filled nightmare. But the biggest breakthrough came from the person I least expected to provide it, my daughter, Jolene. She came home that weekend, her face pale and her eyes shadowed with worry. She was stiff and distant with me, the poison her father had fed her still clouding her judgment. I didn't push. I didn't show her my mountain of evidence. Doing so would just make it my word against her father's. She needed to discover the truth for herself. On Sunday morning, while she was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone, I approached her cautiously. "Honey," I began, my voice gentle. "Do you remember that old family cloud account I set up years ago? The one we used to use for photos before everyone got smartphones?" She looked up, confused. Vaguely. "Why?" "Your father was supposed to be in charge of it, but he was never very good with technology. He forgot the password years ago, and I had to reset it for him. I don't think he ever realized I still had administrator access." I paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "The password is Jolene S. First Ribbon 1998. I walked away, leaving her alone in the kitchen. I didn't know if she would look. Part of me was terrified of what she would find, of the pain it would cause her. But she was 20 years old. She wasn't a child anymore. She deserved the truth, and she needed to find it on her own terms. I went out to the barn and started mucking stalls, the physical labor a welcome distraction. An hour passed. Then another. Finally, the kitchen door opened. Jolene stood there, her phone clutched in her hand. Her face was ashen, her eyes wide with a horrified understanding. Tears were streaming silently down her cheeks. She didn't say a word. She just ran to me, wrapping her arms around my waist and sobbing into my shoulder. "Mom," she choked out. "Oh, Mom. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I saw everything." She had seen the texts. The photos. The casual cruelty. The 2 years of lies. She had seen her father and her aunt for who they truly were. I held my daughter tight, stroking her hair. The wall between us had crumbled. I had my daughter back. And now, I had a new, determined ally. With Jolene on my side, the next phase of my plan could begin. It was time to stop just defending and start actively dismantling their alliance. I knew their relationship was built on a foundation of greed, not love. All I had to do was introduce a little doubt, a little paranoia, and let them tear each other apart. My target was Sterling's biggest insecurity, his fear of being played for a fool. And Mavis's weakness? A secret, reckless past he knew nothing about. Before Mavis came to live with us, she drifted for a few years, leaving a trail of bad debts and questionable acquaintances. One of those acquaintances was a sleazy character from her past involved in backroom poker games. It took my investigator, David, less than a day to track him down. A few $100s was all it took to secure his cooperation. The plan was simple. I needed to sow a seed of doubt in Sterling's mind. And the perfect person to plant that seed was Betty, the town's most notorious gossip, who happened to owe me a favor after I'd helped her trailer her prize-winning mare out of a ditch last winter. I called Betty. "Betty, I need you to do something for me, and you have to make it look like an accident. Next time you see Sterling at the diner, I need you to mention you saw Mavis talking to a very shady-looking man over by the old warehouse. Tell him the man looked like a debt collector, and Mavis looked terrified." Betty, who lived for this kind of drama, agreed with glee. 2 days later, it happened. Sterling was having his morning coffee at the town diner. Betty, playing her part to perfection, ran into him and, in her breathless, gossipy way, delivered the lines I'd fed her. The effect, as I heard on the recordings later that night, was immediate. "Sterling, who was that man you were talking to yesterday by the warehouse?" Mavis, what man? I wasn't near the warehouse. I was getting a manicure. Sterling, don't lie to me, Mavis. Betty saw you. She said he looked like a loan shark. Are you in some kind of trouble? Do you have debts I don't know about? Mavis, that's ridiculous. Betty is a crazy old bat. You believe her over me? After everything we've planned? The seed was planted. He no longer saw her as his partner in crime, but as a potential liability. He started questioning her every move, checking her phone. The recordings became a symphony of suspicion and accusation. He accused her of having secrets, she accused him of being a paranoid, controlling fool who couldn't even secure the money he'd promised. They were so busy watching each other, they never saw me coming. Their alliance was crumbling from the inside out, just as I had planned. All it took was a little push, a whispered rumor, and their foundation of greed began to crack under the pressure. The financial pressure was getting to Mavis. Her dream of a luxury lifestyle was slipping through her fingers, and her patience was wearing thin. She was becoming reckless. And I was ready for it. Part of my investigator's work had been to install a few extra security cameras, not just the obvious ones on the exterior of the barn, but tiny, hidden ones. One was disguised as a smoke detector in the office ceiling, positioned perfectly over the antique fireproof safe where I kept the original, signed breeding certificates for my most valuable horses. Those papers were worth a fortune, proof of lineage that was irreplaceable. One night, listening to the live feed from the house, I heard it. A furious, whispered argument. Sterling was leaving to meet with a potential investor, trying to get a loan against the value of the ranch he didn't legally own. Mavis was furious he was leaving her behind. Mavis, so you just leave me here with no money while you go play the big shot? Sterling, it's not playing. I'm trying to solve our cash flow problem. Just stay put. Don't do anything stupid. Famous last words. An hour after Sterling's truck rumbled down the driveway, the sensor on the office door pinged on my phone. I pulled up the camera feed on my tablet. There she was. Mavis crept into the office, a crowbar in her hand. My heart hammered against my ribs, a mix of fury and exhilaration. This was it. The final piece of evidence. The camera watched, its unblinking eye recording every detail in crisp night vision. She jammed the crowbar into the seam of the heavy safe door. She threw her whole body into it, grunting with effort, her glamorous facade melting away to reveal the greedy, desperate thief she truly was. The metal screeched in protest, but the old safe held firm. She tried for nearly 20 minutes, sweat plastering her hair to her forehead, her frustration mounting with each failed attempt. Finally, she threw the crowbar down in a rage, kicking the safe with her ridiculously expensive boots before storming out of the office. I saved the footage. I watched it 3 times. It was beautiful. It was no longer just a case of fraud, a civil matter of a forged signature. This was attempted burglary. This was a criminal act, caught on tape. She had just single-handedly elevated their crimes to a whole new level. Sterling thought the biggest threat was me being up to something. The truth was, the biggest threat to their plan was never me. It was Mavis's own insatiable greed, and his foolishness in trusting her. He had hitched his wagon to a runaway train, and I had the footage of the crash. It was time to end it. I called Sterling. My voice was carefully crafted, hollow, defeated, the voice of a woman who had finally given up. Sterling, I said quietly. I can't fight anymore. You win. I just want to say goodbye properly. For the sake of the years we had. Let's have one last dinner. At the Sterling Room. Tonight. Just for closure. There was a pause. I could hear him whispering to Mavis in the background. His voice came back on the line, suspicious but intrigued. Fine, Beverly. But no drama. No drama, I promised. I arrived at the restaurant at 6:30 p.m. The Sterling Room was our place, where he'd proposed, where we'd celebrated anniversaries. The irony was delicious. I chose a table in the center of the room, with clear sight lines all around. My team was already in place. Garrett Vance, my lawyer, sat at the bar, looking like any other businessman nursing a club soda. David Park, the investigator, was at a small table by the kitchen. And in a quiet corner booth, Detective Rachel Morrison from the Financial Crimes Unit was enjoying a salad, just another diner on a Tuesday night. At exactly 7, they arrived. Mavis was wearing a black dress that was trying too hard, and around her neck, a string of pearls. My grandmother's pearls. The ones Sterling had claimed were lost during a move years ago. Seeing them on her throat sent a hot flash of rage up my neck, but I kept my expression placid. "You look tired, Beverly," Sterling said as he sat down, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "Hospital stays will do that to you," I replied evenly, referencing the fake story they'd spread about my breakdown. They ordered champagne, the expensive kind, and charged it to what they assumed was their ranch account. I gave the waiter a subtle nod. "Let them." "To new beginnings," Sterling said, raising his glass. "To endings," I countered, lifting my water. "And to the truth." Mavis giggled, a sound like breaking glass. "The truth? That's rich, considering you've been living in denial for weeks." "Have I?" I said, leaning forward slightly. "Let's talk about the truth. Let's talk about the Derby party 2 years ago. You needed me drunk, didn't you, Sterling? To sign some papers." His champagne glass stopped halfway to his lips. "But you were drunk too. Drunk enough that you grabbed the wrong folder and signed a postnuptial agreement that guarantees the ranch stays mine in any divorce." Mavis's giggle died. "That's not possible." "Oh, it's very possible. Just like it was possible for me to find your secret storage unit, with your 2 sets of books and all your love letters." I pulled out my phone. "Your texts are particularly interesting. But the audio recordings are my favorite." I hit play. Mavis's recorded voice filled the space between us, sharp and clear. "Just forge her signature already. She's too stupid to fight back. Once we file it, she'll roll over like always." Diners at nearby tables turned to stare. Mavis lunged for my phone, but I pulled it back. "We're leaving," Sterling snapped, standing abruptly. "I don't think so." On cue, Garrett Vance approached our table, 3 folders in hand. "Mr. Brennan, Ms. Hawthorne." "I'm Garrett Vance, Mrs. Brennan's attorney." He placed the first folder on the table. "This is the irrevocable trust that has protected the ranch for the last 6 weeks. Your fraudulent sale is legally void." He opened the second folder. "This is the evidence of $400,000 in embezzlement. A federal crime." Mavis shrank back. "I didn't know about that." "Your signature is on several of the deposit slips," Garrett noted coolly. "And then there's folder 3. The IRS issue. Your $5 purchase price is considered a gift. You owe gift tax on the full market value of the property. That will be approximately $600,000. Due immediately." That's when Mavis truly lost it. $600,000? "You told me this was all taken care of, you useless old man," she shrieked at Sterling. As they began to argue, Detective Morrison left her booth and approached our table with the measured pace of law enforcement. "Mr. Brennan, Ms. Hawthorne," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I'm Detective Morrison. You're being detained pending an investigation into fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy." "Wait," I said, holding up a hand. "There's one more thing you should see." I placed my tablet on the table and hit play. The entire restaurant watched in stunned silence as the grainy, night vision footage showed Mavis, crowbar in hand, trying to break into my safe. The color drained from Sterling's face. He stared at Mavis, not with anger, but with the horrified realization that he had tied his fate to a common criminal. "This is your fault," Mavis screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You drove him to this. You were always so perfect, so strong. I hate you." "Ma'am, please," Detective Morrison said, as two uniformed officers entered the restaurant. As they were cuffed and led away, Sterling turned to me, his confidence finally shattered, his eyes pleading. "Beverly, please. 18 years. Doesn't that mean anything?" I looked at the man I had once loved, the man who had tried to destroy me. "It meant everything," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. "Until you decided it meant nothing." When the doors of the restaurant swung shut, cutting off Mavis's final, hysterical shriek, a profound silence fell over our table. The entire room seemed to be holding its collective breath. Then, slowly, the normal sounds of dinner resumed, the clink of silverware, the murmur of conversation, but it was different now, charged with the electricity of what they had just witnessed. The waiter approached, his face a mask of professional composure, and silently cleared away their barely touched champagne glasses. He removed every trace that they had ever been there at all. I sat there for a long moment, alone in the sudden quiet. I looked at my simple glass of water, its surface still and calm. The storm had passed. The war was over. If you are still listening to me now, if you have journeyed with me to this point, would you do me a small kindness? Please, take a moment to like this video, and just type the number 1 in the comments below. It lets me know that you're out there, that my story has reached you. It tells me that you've been walking alongside me through all of this. Your support, even something so simple, is a tremendous encouragement, a light in what has been a very long, dark tunnel. Please, just comment with the number 1 so I can see you. And now, let me tell you how it all ended. The courtroom was a sterile, impersonal place, smelling of old wood and floor polish. It felt a world away from the earthy, honest scent of my ranch. Sterling and Mavis sat at the defendant's table, looking small and deflated in their street clothes. Mavis had a high-priced lawyer who looked deeply unhappy to be there. Sterling had a public defender who looked exhausted. There was no grand, dramatic trial. With the mountain of evidence against them, the forged documents, the bank records, the audio recordings, and the cherry on top, the crystal-clear video of the attempted burglary, it was an open-and-shut case. Mavis's lawyer, seeing no way out, had her plead guilty to lesser charges in exchange for her testimony against Sterling. She stood up in court and, with tears that nobody believed, painted herself as a victim, a woman manipulated by a charismatic older man. She threw him under the bus without a second thought. The most difficult part was when Jolene had to take the stand. She walked up there, her chin held high, and looked directly at her father. She told the court, in a clear, steady voice, how he had called her at college, how he had tried to turn her against me, how he had tried to use her as a pawn in his sick game. When his lawyer tried to cross-examine her, asking if she wasn't just angry at her father for the divorce, she looked the lawyer dead in the eye and said, "I'm angry that he tried to steal from the woman who raised me while he was sleeping with my aunt. I'm angry that he's a thief and a liar." You could have heard a pin drop. The judge was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s. She looked at Sterling with utter contempt. The sentencing was swift. For fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement, Sterling received a sentence of 5 to 7 years in a state prison. Mavis, because of her testimony, received 2 years of probation. But the judge wasn't done. She ordered Mavis to pay restitution for her share of the embezzled funds. And, as Garrett had predicted, the IRS came after her for the gift tax on a $2 million property. The financial penalties would cripple her for the rest of her life. Finally, the judge looked at me. "The property known as the Brennan Ranch," she declared, her voice ringing with finality, "is confirmed as the sole and separate property of Mrs. Beverly Brennan. All fraudulent claims are permanently voided." The gavel fell. It was over. Life doesn't just snap back to normal after an earthquake. The shaking stops, yes, but then you have to walk through the rubble, check the foundations, and decide what's worth saving and what needs to be torn down. The first 6 months after the trial were my time in the rubble. The town, God bless them, tried. Casseroles showed up on my porch like clockwork for a solid month: tuna noodle, lasagna, shepherd's pie. It was their way of saying sorry, of admitting they'd chosen the wrong side. I appreciated the gesture, I truly did, but the food often sat in my fridge, a reminder of the public spectacle my private pain had become. The awkwardness was the hardest part. I'd be at the feed store, and Martha Henderson, the same woman who'd whispered about me, would make a big show of coming over. "Beverly, honey, I just feel awful," she'd say, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. I should have known better. That Mavis, she always had a shifty look about her. I'd just nod and give a tight smile, because what else could I do? Saying it's okay felt like a lie, and saying you're right, you should have known better felt cruel. So I lived in that quiet, uncomfortable in-between. There were practical things, too. The endless paperwork of the official divorce. Sitting across from Garrett Vance one last time to sign the final decree felt less like a victory and more like an amputation. It was the severing of a part of my life, a part that had turned gangrenous, but a part of me nonetheless. That night, I didn't celebrate. I sat on the porch and drank a beer, watching the stars come out, feeling the strange, hollow ache of a phantom limb. The ranch was my therapy. The horses didn't care about court dates or town gossip. They just needed feeding. They needed brushing. Their simple, honest needs grounded me. I'd spend hours just grooming Thunder's Pride, the magnificent stallion Sterling had tried to sell. I'd lean my forehead against his warm, powerful neck and just breathe, inhaling the scent of horse and hay, and exhaling the last remnants of fear and betrayal. The rhythm of the ranch, the 4:30 a.m. wake-up call, the chores, the exhaustion at the end of the day, it was the only thing that felt real, the only thing that kept the ghosts at bay. Then, about 6 months after the trial, the letter arrived. It came in the regular mail, tucked between a catalog for fencing supplies and a bill from the vet. The envelope was cheap, thin, and the return address was stamped in stark, black ink, Coleman Correctional Facility. His handwriting, once so familiar on birthday cards and grocery lists, now looked alien, like a relic from another lifetime. My first, visceral instinct was to tear it to shreds. My second was to throw it, unopened, into the fire. But I did neither. I placed it on the kitchen counter and just stared at it, a venomous little white rectangle in the heart of my home. For a full day, I walked around it, avoided it, my eyes skittering past it as if it might bite. What could he possibly have to say that I needed to hear? Excuses? Blame? A pathetic plea for pity? Jolene saw it sitting there when she came home from her classes. From him? She asked, her voice flat. I just nodded. She looked at me, her eyes full of a wisdom that pained me. You don't have to read it, Mom. You don't owe him anything. Not even that. She was right. I didn't owe him a thing. But I realized, standing there in my kitchen, that this wasn't about him. This was about me. This was the last piece of rubble I needed to clear away. The next morning, I took the letter, still sealed, and walked out to the burn barrel behind the barn. The air was crisp, the sky a brilliant, cloudless blue. I didn't have a grand ceremony. I just struck a match, the sulfur flaring to life, and held the small flame to the corner of the envelope. I didn't need to read his words. I didn't need his apologies or his regrets, because they weren't for me. They were for him, a desperate attempt to soothe his own conscience. But his conscience wasn't my burden to carry anymore. Forgiveness, I'd finally understood, isn't about wiping the slate clean for the person who hurt you. It's not about letting them back into your life. It's about letting the poison out of your own heart. It's about telling yourself, this no longer has power over me. It's a gift you give yourself. And my forgiveness was for me to find peace, not for him to find absolution. I watched as the paper caught, the flames greedily consuming the thin envelope. For a brief second, I saw his handwriting, Beverly, curl and blacken before turning to ash. I thought about the man who had written it, sitting in a concrete box, remembering the wooden walls we'd built together. I thought about him tasting regret in his instant coffee, a pale imitation of the rich, dark roast I used to brew every morning. I felt a flicker of something, not pity, but a profound sadness for the man he could have been, for the life he had so carelessly thrown away. The smoke drifted up into the brilliant blue sky and disappeared without a trace. I was letting him go. I was letting go of the woman I used to be, the wife who had loved and trusted him. I was letting go of the hurt, the rage, and the suffocating weight of his betrayal. As the last of the ash drifted away on the breeze, I took a deep breath, and for the first time, it didn't feel like there was a band tightening around my chest. It just felt like air. Clean, fresh, and free. The act of burning that letter felt like the true end of the old era and the real beginning of the new one. A few weeks later, Jolene and Ramona told me they had a surprise for me. They led me out to the main road, their faces beaming with a shared secret. There, leaning against the old oak tree, was a brand new sign, beautifully carved from dark, rich cedar. The old, faded Brennan Ranch sign was gone. In its place, in an elegant, flowing script, were the words, Second Chance Ranch. Beneath the name was the silhouette of a running horse, its head held high, mane flying in the wind. Tears sprang to my eyes, but for the first time in a long, long time, they were happy tears. "It's not for him, Mom," Jolene said softly, squeezing my hand. "He had his chances. This is for us. For the horses nobody wanted. For the kids." It was the most perfect gift I had ever received. It was a new name for a new life. And what a life it has become. My old dream, the one Sterling had always dismissed as a charity case and a liability nightmare, is now the beating heart of this ranch. The therapeutic riding program for children with disabilities is thriving. We don't make a lot of money from it, parents pay what they can, and we absorb the rest, but the profit we turn is measured in milestones, not dollars. There's one little boy, Leo. When he first came to us, he was 7 years old, a tiny, fragile thing with eyes that seemed to hold all the world's sadness. He was nonverbal, lost in his own world of autism. His parents were at their wits' end. For the first few weeks, he wouldn't even get near the horses. He'd just stand by the fence, watching. We paired him with a gentle, old mare named Stardust, a rescue we'd saved from a kill pen. She was thin and weary, with sad eyes of her own. They were two broken souls. And somehow, they understood each other. One day, Leo reached out a trembling hand and touched her nose. Stardust just stood there, perfectly still, and let him. From that day on, a bond was formed. A few weeks later, as his mother stood by the arena fence crying silent tears, Leo leaned forward, wrapped his small arms around Stardust's neck, and whispered his first word. It wasn't Mama or Dada. It was Star. To see a child find his voice, to see a rescued animal find its purpose, that's a kind of wealth Sterling could never comprehend. That's the real treasure of this place. We still hear things, of course. This is a small town. The grapevine is always rustling. Betty, my gossip-in-chief, keeps me updated. Mavis, I'm told, moved back east. The irony is, she's working as a receptionist at a law firm. She lives in a tiny apartment above a laundromat, her wages garnished for the next 10 years to pay the IRS and the restitution she owes me. Her Instagram dreams of a luxury ranch life, of hot yoga and Arabian horses, have dissolved into the harsh, fluorescent reality of consequence. And Sterling, his sister Margaret, calls me every few months. She tells me he's a broken man. He spends his days in the prison library, reading old westerns, lost in a fantasy of a life he once had and destroyed. He writes letters he knows I'll never read. He is serving his time, not just in a cell, but in a prison of his own making, haunted by the ghosts of what he threw away. I feel no joy in his misery, only a quiet, somber sense of justice. He made his bed. Now he has to lie in it. Jolene decided to stay. She's finishing her degree at the state university an hour away, but her heart is here. She's my partner in every sense of the word, her sharp mind for business balancing my old-school horse sense. Seeing her out in the pasture, confident and strong, teaching a nervous child how to hold the reins, it fills a space in my heart I didn't even know was empty. Tonight, as I write this, I'm sitting on my front porch. The sun is setting, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple. The air is cool and smells of freshly cut hay and contentment. Jolene is down by the barn, her laughter carrying on the evening breeze as she plays with Justice, Midnight Star's beautiful black colt, who is now a strong, confident yearling. He was born in the middle of the storm, but he has known nothing but peace. The ranch feels lighter now. The same fences, same buildings, same horses, but the weight of secrets and lies is gone. In its place, there is purpose. There is partnership. There is peace. My life's work wasn't worth $5. It turns out, it's priceless. And it was never for sale. It was always, and will always be, completely mine. Thank you all for listening to my story. If you've been through your own battles, know this, you are stronger than you think. Don't ever let anyone tell you what you are worth. You tell them. Thank you, and be well.